Hello everybody and welcome back, or if you're new here, my name's Bree, and today we will be playing... Wait, no, we're not playing anything. Today's video is a little bit different from my usual content, and the fact that you're seeing this means I considered it enough of a success to make it onto the internet. Though I have posted things like this in the past. No! No! I forgot how to heal. Oh, this is my turn! Oh my gosh! Oh! Oh gosh. Okay, you know what? I'll just get out and walk from here. I like this golden glow around my head. It really gives me a sense of self-confidence to continue to do nothing. So the bar is pretty low. As I mentioned, today is something a little different. I've cosplayed a lot on this channel, and I've stepped away from the camera to make more hands-on creative videos. Today brings those two worlds together. Let me take you back to March 2024, about 5 months ago. I think I want to cosplay Navia. I can make that. Yeah, that's the story. Now, I don't have any experience making my own cosplay unless you count these. I do have at least some sewing experience, meaning I've made a skirt. And thrift flipped a few shirts. I have no idea why the parasites in my brain told me I could make this Navia cosplay, but here we are. Before we get any further into this story though, I do have some sad news to report. Unfortunately, my hard drive crashed and I lost a lot of the very early footage, including picking out fabric, making the shorts, making the first version of Navia's skirt. Oh yeah, the first. But other than that, I have almost every step of the way. And just to show you how long I've been working on this, instead of talking about the parasites in my brain telling me I could do this, my original joke was that this was my I could land the plane project. We're that out of date on the internet now, so let's get started. My original trip to the fabric store, I picked out 4 fabrics: a white cotton, a navy cotton, black satin, and a yellow satin. I also got clear straps, some snap buttons, gold bias tape, a zipper, and some pearls. I had fusible interfacing at home, but I picked up some more, and we'll get into this later, but fusible interfacing. My first order of business was to take care of the shorts and the skirt. I felt like those were the easiest things to tackle, and I will keep this part short since all the footage is gone, and so is that original skirt. Basically, for the shorts, I took a pair of flowy shorts that already fit me. I outlined the waistband and the 4 panels that make up the shorts. If you look at like the stitching on the sides, you can see what I mean when I talk about 4 panels. But I outlined those onto the white cotton, cut them out, and sewed them together. I left a little gap in the waistband to insert an elastic band, and then sewed that shut, and then attached the waistband to the 4 panels. I did it all through guesswork. I have no idea if that's the right way to make shorts or not, but that's how we got there. And they turned out mostly okay. For the skirt, I used my prior experience of making a skirt, except I felt in my little brain, which I should have probably done some more research on how to make some of this stuff, but I did not. I liked to try and learn through guessing, which when you're working with limited materials, would not recommend. I took my original knowledge and I just used a longer piece of fabric for the actual skirt itself, since I was planning on pleating it, because Navia's skirt is pleated. For the waistband, I measured it to fit my actual waist, and then I put a piece of fusible interfacing inside of it, meaning I ironed fusible interfacing on, folded it over, and I had my waistband. Fusible interfacing I used to give the waistband some sort of structure. Then I took that long piece of fabric I mentioned, folded it into pleats, and pinned it onto the waistband with those pleats in it, and sewed the two together. Now this is the first piece of footage that I do have, and you can see in this piece of footage that the skirt is not flowy, not very pleated, and pretty stiff, and doesn't look very much like Navia's skirt, but I had finished it and it was good enough for me at that point. I'll save you the pain of the zipper and the gold bias tape. I did a bad job with both of those the first time around, but I did learn from my mistakes, so there's that at least. The next part that I worked on was the bodice, and if you're on the cosplay side of the internet at all, you might have seen this trick before. You use plastic wrap and duct tape to kind of make your own pattern. So I did just that. I wrapped myself in plastic wrap. This is so the duct tape doesn't stick to your clothes or your skin. And then I wrapped myself in duct tape. You cut that off very carefully. Would not recommend doing what I did and cutting it in the back without being able to see, but you cut it off very carefully and you have a piece of duct tape that fits to you and you can use that as a pattern. I cut my duct tape bodice into 3 pieces, 2 for the back and 1 for the front, and then I cut out space on the sides for yellow fabric and a space in the front for white fabric. First, I cut my front piece of navy fabric and I hemmed the edges, and then it was time to add the black satin. And I was really worried about doing this because I've heard satin and silk are very slippery, they're difficult to work with, so I was scared. But what I did was I folded in the corners of the navy at the top, matched the black satin to where that corner would be, and I sewed those together. For the white fabric in the front, I took a piece of fabric a little bit bigger than that duct tape I had cut out, pleated it, added some gold bias tape, very lazily. I'll talk about this later, I promise, and sewed it onto the front. Then I added my fusible interfacing to the front part of the bodice, or at least what I thought was fusible interfacing. This is what I had picked up from the store. I still don't know what it was to this day because I threw out the packaging immediately, but it almost destroyed the bodice and I was in panic mode. I followed the instructions, ironed it on, whatever, pulled it off, and it started pulling off pieces of fabric. It was all sticky. It was ruining the towel that I used for it. Again, full panic mode. But I was fortunately able to cover it with some of the fusible interfacing that I already had, so crisis averted, and the bodice was safe. I did think about using steel boning instead of just fusible interfacing, and in the future that's probably the route that I would end up going with, just because I ended up making a lot of changes to the bodice later on, and having that fusible interfacing on the back made it a little bit difficult to sew, but that's a problem for future me. I measured out that space that I had saved for the yellow fabric on the side, cut that out, and attached the front to the sides to the back of the bodice. In order to hold this bodice together, magically, without any support whatsoever, video game clothes, am I right? I used clear straps and snap buttons in the back. So basically, I would not recommend this method because I stabbed myself several times. I sewed on snap buttons onto the clear straps and also onto the bodice, and I was able to snap the back parts together. After completing this part of the bodice, I tried it on and it looked a little bit blocky on me, so I added some darts. This was the first set of darts that I added, and this helps it fit the contours of the body better. Doing this was definitely a good idea because it looked way less rectangular afterwards. At this point, I have my bodice, I have my skirt, I have my shorts, tried it on all together, and the bodice just seemed better than the quality of the skirt. Not saying that it's anything amazing or anything like that, but the skirt just didn't seem up to par. So I took my seam ripper and I ripped out all the seams of the skirt and decided to start anew. I was a little bit panicked about doing this, but again, it later became clear that this was the right choice. I did save the waistband because it fit well and obviously the zipper, but I did remake the skirt. However, before making the skirt again, I was exhausted from sewing so much, so I decided to switch to more arts and crafts rather than more sewing, which brings us to the foam pieces. Navia has a lot of little metallic details all over her outfit, like the buttons on the front of her outfit, the thigh garter things on her thighs, stuff like that. I decided to make everything out of Eva foam. EVA? Eva? I'm gonna go with Eva. I'm not sure, but we're gonna go with Eva foam for the rest of this video. I cut out all the little pieces with a razor blade, very carefully, and anything that needed a perfect circle, I used the bottom of a glass to trace a perfect circle, and anything that needed to be duplicated, I would make one and then use that one to trace out all the others. I then primed all of my foam pieces with 2 or 3 coats of primer, or 4. I absolutely lost count, but we primed it, which is good. I highly recommend doing this because I did not do this when I was painting the headpiece for my Gyarados cosplay, and it took me approximately 132 coats of paint because the foam just kept eating it all up and it was patchy. And not prime your foam. After the primer was all set and dry, I painted everything with gold and navy paint accordingly, and then I sealed it with an acrylic paint sealer afterwards. Now, you can do all these things with aerosols or just actual liquid paint. I am in a small space, so I used actual liquid paint, but I did let things air out outside a little bit. Would not recommend aerosols unless you have appropriate outdoor space, but I'm not a professional, so this is just my opinion here. So once everything was sealed, I decided to attach those little arrow buttons to the bodice piece just to see how things were looking, and I used fabric glue to do that. Fabric glue and hot glue are my best friends during this project. Once I attached those and had finished all the other foam pieces, I would attach the rest of them later. It was time to get back to sewing and skirt number 2. This time around, I used a much longer piece of fabric and put in way more pleats, and it gave me that beautiful flowing pleated skirt look that Navia has. I also learned how to use the zipper foot on my sewing machine, and look at this! Beautiful! We love it. Definitely not perfect, but way better than the first attempt. I also learned how to correctly attach bias tape to my projects, and again, not perfect, but way better. So then I tried on the bodice, the skirt, and the shorts again, and I decided to add a couple more darts to the bodice. I was getting brave, much more brave with my bodice. With all of that complete, the next big part of her outfit, I would say, is this like big flowy half skirt in the back, kind of Victorian looking skirt. And I was afraid of doing that, so I put that off for a long time. But in the meantime, I decided it was a good time for accessories. All of the following items are the things that I bought off of Amazon and like slightly modified to fit the costume, which were a hat, boots, these lacy cuff things that were meant for like a vampire or a pirate, some mesh gloves, stockings, that hoop skirt that I mentioned, a wig, this Victorian lace necktie thing, and a vision from Etsy. It seems like these would be way more difficult to get based on what Genshin has told us, but like you can just order it from Etsy for like $15. I don't know. No, you didn't hear from me. The cuffs seemed like a good, easy project to tackle next. The set that I got is supposed to be like this collar and these 2 little wrist cuffs to put on, again for like some sort of like vampire or fancy pirate or something like that. And Navia's cuffs that I was using these for are on her upper arm, so too big and too small to fit onto an upper arm. Basically what I did was I took the Velcro straps from the necktie, cut off each one, and then put a little extender on the wrist pieces to make it fit my upper arm. Then I sewed on black ribbon onto it, glued on lots of ribbons, and the vision with hot glue. With the arm cuffs done, I had no choice but to face the hoop skirt. I thought about this for so long. It was the last thing I thought about before I went to bed. The first thing that I thought of when I woke up. It haunted me throughout the day, and it haunted me in my dreams. So that hoop skirt that I got is a circle. You can buy half hoop skirts, just throwing that out there, but the hoop skirt that I bought is a full circle. In my head, I decided I'll just cut every circle in half, and then it'll become that half skirt that I need. Perfect. Unfortunately, when you cut circles in half, and there's nothing to continue to support them being circles, they just turn into straight lines. So what I had to do is very gently bend the boning, because I did snap a couple of them by accident. And then the top piece of the boning, instead of cutting that in half, because I learned from my mistakes on the first 2, I duct taped it into an oval and rested that part against my lower back to give it kind of that poof that I was looking for. So after trying it on at this point, my idea was to cover it first in the yellow satin and then the black satin, but how to do this? I could use the waistband. I took the yellow satin, folded it in around the waistband, and sewed that shut, so it was kind of wrapped around the waistband and flowing over the back of the hoop skirt. This worked way better than I thought it would. And then I ended up taking the black satin, sewing it to the top part of that folded over yellow part. Again, worked way better than I thought it would. I included some floral wire in the hem of the yellow skirt to give it some shape if I needed to. And I also did add ruffles onto the skirt, which Navia's skirt has ruffles. and I was going to skip them because I was so tired of sewing, but I'm so glad I didn't because they made a huge difference in the skirt. And of course, in true cosplayer fashion, I spent the night before I needed this cosplay hot gluing the pearls on. Besides this big Victorian-looking skirt, another key part of Navia's outfit is the bow that goes with it. This is the only item that I practiced making before actually making it, unless you count the pleated skirt. I made my bow prototype, my bodotype if you will, and decided I would essentially bunch together that bulky part of the ribbon, the bow, the tails of the ribbon, and the sash that goes around the waist by tying a piece of satin around all three of them. I wanted that bow to have like a nice poofy, thick bow look, so I actually made it into like a tiny pillow basically, and when you sew it together, it goes from rectangle to bow shaped. The tails I made by taking just a long piece of yellow satin and a long piece of black satin and sewing them together. I also put floral wire into these tails to give those some shape too. Unfortunately, I have no footage of me making the sash part that hooked onto the bodice. I was like a week out from when I needed this, and I think I was kind of delirious by that point, but I'll go over all that soon. And with the skirt totally finished with the bow, I just had one major piece left. The iconic hat. I spent an incredible amount of time hot gluing feathers and poofs and ribbons and pearls onto this hat. And I finished it out with painting the underside of the brim with gold fabric paint to make those kind of diamond shapes that are on the underside of her hat. It looks like something that is attached to the hat in the game, but I figured the easiest way to tackle it would just be with fabric paint. I also used that fabric paint to hand paint the designs on the bodice, as you can see in this clip here. And in this clip, you can also see the little hooks that I sewed onto the bodice for the sash. And speaking of the sash, let me talk about all the items that you did not see in this video. First up, the necklace. Remember that Victorian necktie thing I mentioned? So I cut the lace on that shorter and attached foam pieces with the little jewelry hoops that you would use for charm bracelets, and then I connected the foam pieces with jewelry hoops as well. The shoes. I hand painted and hot glued blue gems onto the shoes. The gems did fall off 10 steps into walking in them. Thankfully, my friend brought dress tape, and that stuff is stronger than the will of the Raiden Shogun herself. The arm armor, don't have a better way to describe it, but the arm armor I made out of foam and added a Velcro piece to strap it to my forearm. The thigh guards, again, no idea what to call these, but basically a similar concept. They are made out of foam, secured with Velcro, and I hot glued the black ribbon and the extra foam piece onto them. The sash, I sewed hooks onto the ends of the sash that were attached to the bow, as well as a piece of black fabric for the front, and I glued the ship wheel pieces onto that front piece. Those hooks hook onto 2 spots on the bodice, and that gives it kind of a complete look around the waist. And the umbrella, another iconic part of Navia's outfit. I almost did not use this. It's not my favorite part of the cosplay, but it does make me want to tackle another prop in the future. Basically, I just bought an umbrella and I wrapped some of my leftover foam around the handle and spent days and days and days painting and repainting black and yellow and gold paint onto the umbrella. Well, that's it. And seeing each piece one by one, I was pretty happy with each one, but a little unsure of what it would look like all together. So, here it is. And that is the story of how my Navia cosplay came to be. It was not easy. I learned a lot during the process. Would I do this again? Yeah, I would, but maybe with something a little bit easier. It's not perfect by any means, but I'm really proud of what I accomplished and I had a lot of fun doing it. And I hope you had fun. I know this video again is a little different than what I normally do, but I hope you found it enjoyable to see kind of my process and crazy squirrel brain as I made this Navia concept come to life. And as a little thank you for sticking around to the end of this video, I have some behind the scenes footage of my trusty assistant helping me out during the process. So thank you again for your support. I hope you had fun, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Bye everybody!